Okay, it is exactly 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. It is Wednesday, November the 25th, 2020, the day before Thanksgiving. And welcome to week number 3 of Drugs and Crime. Week number 3 signals the halfway point as far as modules are concerned, and putting you on notice that after we complete week 3 this week, coming up Sunday, that you will be able to submit 1 to 3, but absolutely by the time we get to the due date for week 4, I will not be accepting assignments from weeks 1 to 3. So if you haven't turned them in, then that's an opportunity for you. You may get points taken off. In addition, reminding you that it does not include discussion posts for weeks 1 and 2. Okay? It does not include discussion posts for weeks 1 and 2 because we are currently working on week 3. Okay, and of course you know that after Sunday we will not allow discussion posts to be submitted for week 3 unless you submitted a discussion post by Saturday, and then you're going to do a reply post after that. So that's the only exceptions we have. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen. Okay, because we got quite a bit to cover. And you can see that this is week 3. We have 3 more lectures to go after this. Your recordings for weeks 1 and 2 are here. Week 3 will be here either by tonight, late tonight, or tomorrow, depending on how fast that they provide it for me. And we'll come back to the announcement. Let's look at the course calendar. Let's look at the calendar. Here is the course calendar. This is where we are. Your reading assignment, which was given earlier, I sent you the PowerPoints to correspond with that on Sunday, the 22nd. Your initial post, enforcement or treatment, was due yesterday. And then this is the live lecture right now. Your reply post is due Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. Your written assignment is on connection between drugs, health, and what's the whole thing? Well, I'll show you the whole thing in just a few minutes. So with drugs and health, and then of course your quiz, which you know about, is a time quiz. It is a closed book quiz as well. And then we will be starting week 4 that next day. All right. Oh, a reminder, the course ends the 18th. That is the exact last day. No exceptions unless, and I'm not going to say what that unless means. That's something you have to talk over with your advisor or your dean. But at any rate, your written assignments will all be due, excuse me, will be due by 11:59 p.m. December 18th. That's exactly 1 week before Christmas. And so the course ends if you turn in an assignment at 12 o'clock, which will be the 19th, and after, it's not going to happen. Even if you turn it in, I have a way of ignoring it for grading, and I will not. I have had that happen in the last term with several students. Okay, so be aware of that. All right, so now let's go back to the course home, and let's look at the announcement. So for this week, we're dealing with policy and social trends, mental health, and criminal behavior. Certainly two things that have to do with drugs, and we'll be talking about that tonight. And so chapters 3 and 4 of the textbook, and then these articles, concurring mental health and substance use disorders, guide to diagnosis and treatment, a cure for crime, can mental health treatment diversion reduce crime among youth, predictors of assessing substance abuse among individuals with mental disorders released from the correctional custody, and then finally substance abuse and mental illness, challenges for intervention. And then there are activities that we're going to talk about tonight during the course of this lecture. Okay. The discussion post, I've already spoke on that. The quiz, I've already spoke on that. And the written assignment, the full title was Connection Between Drugs, Mental Health, and Crime. And then I want you to continue to be strong and finish strong. Make sure you follow the module and the rubrics and listen to the things that I say in the lecture. And then adversity is a springboard to success. I'm going to try to get this recording for you so you can learn more about why I say that in the future, very near future. So some of you who have had me in other classes already know all about what that stands for. Okay. So now let's get right into the module itself. Again, I encourage you to use the Drugs and Crime Course Guide. Again, if you click on this, it opens up a tool that you can utilize that tells you about each week's module. We're at module 3 for discussion posts. So if you clicked on that, it'll have you take a look at this, help you to deal with, then the course project is not applicable anymore. It's your written assignment because the course was revised to take that out. And then research page and things of that nature. But one of the things that I did tell you is that if you were to go to the School of Justice Studies, and if you were trying to find some information, go to the paralegal and utilize FastCase. FastCase helps you to find statutes, laws, regulations, constitutions from all 50 states, and it helps you to find that kind of information. Of course, you can also go through the library and you will be able to find information that pertains to various articles. Okay, so make sure you use this, the course that's designed for this class. So let's look at the assignments for this week. Okay, remember to read the following: optimal design, dynamic allocation of treatment enforcement in illicit drug control. And for your initial post, you're going to deal with each of these bullet points where you select either enforcement or treatment and rehabilitation, defend your position, and describe the pros and cons. Then in your reply post, select a person's post. Do you agree or disagree with their post? If why, add additional information and provide a website link or current event showing the success or failure of a approach. Okay. Excuse me. So that will be your discussion post. Now for the written assignment itself, let's move this up here. Again, you know the scenario that you're using, the same one that you used for week 1, involving Dave. And you'll explore a different aspect of Dave's involvement related to law, mental health, and corrections each week. It reminds you. So in this week, you're going to address the connection between mental health and the self-medication phenomenon. Identify how this connection impacted Dave. Summarize the risk factors for criminal behavior due to substance abuse and mental illness. Explain the relationship between substance abuse and criminal behavior. We're going to touch on that tonight. And identify the relationship in Dave's scenario. Provide at least one credible source. At least one. Did you hear that? More the better, but at least one. Okay. Source as an APA formatted reference. Now, what that also means is citation in the body and then a reference at the end. Use professional language dealing with spelling and so forth in a 2 to 3 page paper. That's why I said you might want to use more than one credible source, but at least one. If you don't use any, it's going to adversely affect your grade. Let's go take a look at the rubric. I have already spoken about that. It's due Sunday. Let's take a look at the rubric. As you know, or should know, which column did I recommend that you base your paper on? The far right or the far left or the ones in the middle? Which is the far right. That ought to be your goal. Now, if you notice very carefully, that in order to do so, you're going to have to cover each of the points in this area dealing with the self-medication and mental health. Notice this, that exemplary summary of factors for his criminal behavior due to his substance abuse and mental illness, with thorough details on the risk factors that Dave faces. Exemplary explanation of the relationship between substance abuse and criminal behavior with detailed relationships and scenario. And then APA sources cited in APA with no errors. That means, again, you're not successfully doing APA if you just have references at the end. You have to have sources in the body of the paper, at least one credible source. That's what it calls for. If you don't have any, you're going to start down here. I would say, quite honestly, that in order to satisfy the previous 2 sections, you at least need to have some information to support the statements that you're going to do so. But I will be looking for a credible source in the paper. Otherwise, you're going to end up over here with 1 point. And then this is the requirement of 2 to 3 pages. Remember, double space and cover page, a reference page that does not count. Okay. Very, very, very important. Very important. If you fall short of the page, 2 to 3 pages, professional language not used or did not meet the requirement of 2 to 3 pages, you're going to end up with 1. So let's say you left out sources. So then you could end up with 2 points as opposed to 8 points down here. Here, you want to adequately cover the details of the sections in the requirement here. Okay, don't just touch on them, because if you get brief with them, you're going to end up either in 1, 2, or 3. So the key thing is get 50 points. Any questions? Okay. All right. And of course, you know that's due Sunday. Your quiz, 30 minutes, contains 20 questions. And you'll have an opportunity to complete this quiz 1 time. Okay. And you will be alerted when half your time is. And when you have 5 minutes left, 1 minute left, 30 seconds. Now be aware that because you're abiding by the academic misconduct policy, again, no notes, no sticky notes, no books open, no PowerPoints, no notes that you wrote down can be used. It's going to be based on as if you were sitting in the classroom physically and you had all of your books and you had an empty desk except the paper that you were putting your answers on and whatever your tool that you would be using, in that case for writing. In this case, it's typing here. And then your live classroom lecture will, so all of these are due this Sunday. Okay. So now let's get into what this week's module is all about. Dealing with the lesson content. I've already told you about the readings, you know that. Okay. So let me first of all start out by saying this, and it's written right here, and I say this all the time in this class, that there is a strong correlation, I should say, or connection between crime and drugs, and actually mental health as well. When you have an individual who has mental health illnesses and they use substances or abuse substances or are addicts, they increase the chance of becoming recidivists. And they give you these statistics here, which you can take a look at. Mental illness increases the person who's an addict. And it says about 20% for alcohol, 27% for cocaine, and 86% for cigarettes. So the point of the matter is, just be aware that individuals who have mental health problems and utilize substance abuse, opioids, methamphetamines, marijuana, even though it's legal in many instances, remember, and other drugs will have very serious consequences and will, as they say, move further away from being able to be reached or cured. In the field of psychology, when one suffers from mental health disorders along with substance abuse, it's called a dual diagnosis. And the reason is because you have to diagnose that person as an addict, and you have to also diagnose that person for whatever mental disorder that they have. And it makes it tougher, as it says, leads to complicated issues for the criminal justice system. Look at this co-occurring disorder. So two or more disorders occurring in the same person, that's comorbidity, of course, obviously would make the situation worse. So look what happens when it's mental disorder other than substance abuse, and how it crosses over, and look at substance abuse added to it, and it makes it disastrous for that individual. And it increases the number of individuals who are going to find themselves committing crimes. And so their cognitive ability to be able to understand and appreciate right from wrong, and we're not talking about mental, we're not talking about insanity, but to appreciate right from wrong is scarred or frayed because, one, they have a mental problem, which, gives them already a problem start, but then it complicates it when you add drugs to the mix. And so that is why one of the key factors in corrections, which I teach, I remind my students that it is important not just to look at the drug issue, but also to determine that there are quite a few individuals who don't just have the drug issue, but they have the drug illness and the mental illness operating together. And it comes about sometimes in terms of dealing with individuals who have mental health problems when they self-medicate. So it says here, self-medication does little to eliminate mental health issues. To the contrary, coming down from the drug-induced feeling can make the mental problem be deeper and create an up and mostly a down cycle of emotional stability. So certain drugs can trigger mental health symptoms, like that spice, that K2, even I believe marijuana, we believe almost every drug that I know, paranoia, delusion, depression, and other situations where individuals don't make really good decisions in life. And one of those decisions oftentimes come about when the individual has to support that drug habit and they go out and they commit a crime. So it says individuals in that situation, it says not only is the person at risk of offending, but they are vulnerable to become victims as well. So that is, they can be used and they will find themselves in situations where they can be assaulted, they can be robbed, they can be raped, or other conflicts because they're not able to, as they say, look out for themselves. It's like having a baby or a young child and turning them loose in the world. So let's look at the risk factors that go with addiction. These are things that you should be paying close attention to because you got to write about them. So it says there are biological factors, that psychological factors that deal with the mind, and environmental factors. Environmental factors have to do with the area or how they were raised or where they were raised. Psychological has to do with how that mind perceives the life that they live. And then the biological has to do with the effects that these drugs have on that person's mind and body. So let's look at what they say here in terms of juveniles and drug use, because that is a tremendous group where individuals are introduced to drugs. Look at the risk factors that are on the left here, and look what contribute to it. And these are things that I was talking about when I talk about environmental factors: chaotic environment, ineffective parenting, little or no attachment, inappropriate or aggressive classroom behavior, academic failure, no desire to perform academically, poor social coping skills. In other words, they don't get along with others, affiliate with deviant peers, individuals who are like themselves, and the perceived external approval of drugs use where the community or family that they're in, maybe it's the family that does that, and maybe their parents were also suffering from either mental illness or substance abuse. So these are some of the risk factors. Then the protective factors that will counteract that is a strong family bond, parental engagement in the child's life, clear expectations of parents. Notice the role that parents are playing here. Academic success, strong bonds with organizations such as school, community, and church, and conventional norms dealing with drugs and alcohol. You notice here that the person is pictured as sitting down. They feel like they're lost and all alone. Over here, they're nurtured by that parent or that adult there. Okay. So it's a very, 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 very serious. I taught special ed for about 3 or 4 years, and I dealt with this next section that they're talking about, where it says an increased risk for substance use disorder is associated with ADHD, and dealing with the importance of their childhood. And so ADHD complicates the situation. I had these behavioral disorder students that were there, and the way that they would operate in terms of controlling them was with drugs like Ritalin. Have you ever heard of Ritalin? Yes. And what Ritalin does is it suppresses, it actually puts them in a semi sleep state. They're not, they will sleep, but they're not in control of things. And so there is a connection between substance use disorders and the mental illness disorders. Now it says research on the connection between substance use and severe mental health disorders in youth is minimal. However, the research does indicate that adolescents with substance use disorders also have a high rate of mental health illnesses. So basically, what they're really saying is that there are some serious problems that go with that. Over 60% of adolescent and community-based substance use disorder treatment programs meet the criteria for other mental illnesses as well. All right. And then here's a chart here. And then there are different policies. So be aware of that. But we started out initially by saying that when an individual has a mental illness and is addicted to drugs, they're in a very, very precarious situation. You cannot address one. You need to address both of these in order to hit that individual at a point where, or take them to a point where they won't be a recidivist. All right. So what are the enforcement policies on drugs and crime? Well, there have been, as you looked at the materials. You're familiar with the fact that the war on drugs existed. I remember talking about the war on drugs, where laws were passed to try to get difficult, rather put high sentences on cartels or drug dealers. But also there were laws that related to put individuals in long years of incarceration without actually treating them for the problem. And so it just continued on and on and on. And so it said, other than shifting the age to consume alcohol to 21, the substance use and abuse issues have been minimally adjusted to enhance sentences for drug and alcohol. So if you look at this, there's a brief history. We talking about the war on drugs, but this is the approach. You're gonna. So what I want you to do is, if you go through this, you can check and you can see all the way leading up to how they have approached the determination, or there's been a change in terms of dealing with drug treatment in itself. So if you come down here, back down to where we were, and you'll be able to do this, and you'll hear it. You can hear it. So you're going to see a brief history of culture and policy. However, though, as I said earlier, there was so much believing that the war on drugs, going back to the 70s and the 80s, as I said, where laws were passed and sentencing disparities, it says, were created for the possession of crack cocaine. And you know what was really bad about it is that crack cocaine actually came in during that era, and crack cocaine was a cheap high. I remember being the village attorney in a town called Ford Heights, and they used to call that the crack cocaine capital of the south suburbs. That is also a town where I was also a police officer and an investigator. And I can tell you that there were many houses in that community where crack cocaine was manufactured. You should be aware that crack cocaine involves a mixture of various chemicals and heat and cocaine, and that it brings it to a boil, and then the water goes down, and then it leaves a rock, and it's a very cheap high. And so it is actually the thing that has created the violence in gang activity to protect their territories, where it became more violent. When I was a kid, excuse me, the gangs themselves were not the same as this group now, because crack cocaine. And when crack cocaine came on, and it says here, crack cocaine was cheap enough to be a street drug, and it gave users a mental high that helped them manage their feelings. So what they did, they went on a trip. And then what you did after that is that you would want to get back to that trip and get to that high. And you could never do it. And so you'd end up chasing it. And the way that you continue to get high is you'd increase your dosage. And I lost a sister in 1994 who overdosed on cocaine, and that's what happened to her. She was addicted to it, but she had an unusually high amount because she was trying to get to a new high. And what it did, and when I was in the police academy, we actually studied this, and I got a certificate in this, is that, just in short, what it would do is it would cause your heart to get bigger, expand it, and then just like a balloon, when you're blowing air in it, it would explode, and then the person would go into cardiac arrest and die. So policies that the law enforcement had that took a zero tolerance approach led to a whole bunch of arrests, and not many were treated. And so that overcrowded the criminal justice system. There were mandatory sentences passed for having in possession a certain amount, and there were individuals who needed rehabilitation over long periods of incarceration. And so it just continued on, and it dealt with for example, it says possession of a small amount of crack cocaine for personal use called for a mandatory prison sentence that would preclude parole or even early releases. Also, listen to this: small quantities of marijuana were felony crimes and destroyed the future of individuals from going to college and across the country. One of the reasons it destroyed them is they got convictions. When they got those convictions, they didn't qualify for federal loans. And so it created a very serious problem. So up to the beginning of the 21st century, the criminal justice system limited most of its consideration of mental health to competency to stand trial and legal insanity. Otherwise, there was little consideration for mental illness. So that's the only way that they looked at it. So they didn't look at it in the point of looking at it from the perspective that it was a double shot, a double whammy to the individual to have a mental problem and to use drugs. I think, quite honestly, anyone who uses those drugs either have a mental problem or can develop a mental problem. It slows down your thinking process. It causes you not to remember things. And you know, and I know that you can lose your jobs because you have drug tests that you have to pass. I remember one time someone came to me and they knew I didn't drink. They knew I didn't do drugs or anything. And they asked me if I could give them some of my urine. I said, I'm not doing that. But the point of the matter is that people go to extremes to get their jobs. But the bottom line is that there have been approaches now where lawmakers, criminal justice professionals, and mental health professionals advocate a treatment and rehabilitation strategy to avoid a possible sentence for drug offenders, especially those with mental health issues. There is a movement among the country, and we here in Illinois have a statute. This is what I used to share with the students in the other class, and I'm going to send you a copy of this. And it demonstrates that the movement in law enforcement, and then this was in some videos that were in the other class, that individuals who were, they have what they call deflection programs. And the deflection program is designed that when an individual comes to law enforcement with paraphernalia or drugs or things like that, that they're not incarcerated, but they're sent to get help in programs. And so I'm going to share that information with you. I'll send you that right after the lecture is over today in an email. There is also some racial issues that were involved here. Minority communities were adversely affected dealing with the war on drugs. And there was a a serious disparity in that resulted in discrimination for African Americans and other minorities. All right. There were issues where, as it says, husbands and wives with no employment were enticed to the drug market to make money, to obtain money for their families, and the policies were written to deter them from selling drugs. However, the illegality of those drugs kept profits high, and it became more beneficial. You remember the video that we Freakonomics of crack cocaine. You remember that from last week? Yeah, so that kind of explained this whole section here pretty much. Okay, and so anyway, so begin to move towards providing help. President Obama signed a law that came from Durbin. Dick Durbin is our senior majority leader in the Senate for the United States, and is one of I know him from Illinois as a U.S. Senator, and sponsored a bill to address the issues of sentencing being far too long, and that there needs to be more of an approach instead of locking people up, but to get sentencing lower and to help. And you can read about that in this section here. Okay. But as I said before, I'm going to send you a piece that I learned about a couple years ago. I think it's Senate Bill 2830 or 20. Anyway, I'll send that to you, and it'll explain what I was talking about a few minutes ago, dealing with deflection. And you can even research it and look it up once you get the information. It'll be sent tonight. So we move on to the question of whether or not you believe that the goal in dealing with this issue, the traditional approach, punishment from the war on drugs, whether or not that's the best way to deal with recidivism, to punish people or just lock them up for long periods of time. But it was quite clear that when those individuals, by the way, you do know that drugs are available in prison and jail to inmates. You're aware of that, right? Yep, it's true. And there are a number of ways that they get it. They even get it from the guards or the correction officers that will do so to make some extra money. It's tragic, but I'm aware from my practice of many years of representing people how that happened. And so the trends for policymakers and those that disperse government funds has been to push toward alternative policies within the corrections as to address mental illness and reduce drug-related recidivism. Okay, and then this is one they talk about in Miami-Dade, Florida, drug court. I represented people in drug court many times. One of the main objectives that the judges did in drug court was if your quantity was not a huge, tremendous amount, which many people didn't have a large amount. They had small amounts, as we talked about earlier in this session, and they were incarcerated. But see, what happened is that those individuals were introduced to individuals who would show them that you can make a living out of not using the drugs, but selling the drugs. And that created recidivism. Okay, and so you can go through and you can look at each of these dealing with Tampa, Florida. You can take a look at that when you get an opportunity, where it starts out with the height of the crack epidemic and first drug courts in Florida, leading all the way up to established mental health courts. So they went from dealing with just the drug courts all the way to dealing with mental health, and recognizing what I said earlier. Okay. And I talked about drug courts a few minutes ago. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So now you will take the time to go through these and choose the best answer, and then click submit. And you can, for example, ask, patients with schizophrenia tend to have high rates of what? Of these four. Which one do you think? Caffeine use, alcohol and tobacco use, weight loss, sleep disorders. That's right. Remember, we talked about that. So then, during the Obama administration, which pact was signed into law as it relates to sentencing? Legalization of marijuana, the cocaine law, Fair Sentencing Act, or the heroin bill? Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yep. And so you can go through this, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can do the same thing. All right. Okay, let's talk about this last one. Comorbidity is defined as which of the following? 2 individuals with the same disorder, the abuse of more than one type of drug, 2 or more disorders occurring in the same person, when multiple individuals die from similar drugs. You are absolutely right. So so these are things that can help you to get ready for the quiz. So that's your knowledge check information there. Okay. And that is it. I think I did. I think I covered all. Let me make sure. I want to double check. Yep. So do you have any questions? Okay. So now I need to give you a key phrase. And the key phrase I want to give you for tonight is, you got to do it just like I'm saying it. Drugs and mental illness. I'll repeat it. Drugs and mental illness. Give me that. You got to have the whole thing. If you put just one part or the other, you're not going to get your points. Drugs and mental illness. Okay. Well, I'm going to say good night to you. Wish you guys the best. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Stay safe. Thank you. I personally am opting to follow the recommendations of the CDC. We are not traveling. We are not having family members over. We are having only the people in our house. And, you know, looking at the outlook now that has been given to us of a number of vaccines that are coming forth, either by the end of the year or the beginning of the year, and all the different things. I've heard some things about some of the vaccines saying that there are side effects. Well, there's always going to be that until they get them to the point. But let me say this. Without the vaccines, we have a major side effect. It's called COVID-19. And it's no joke. No joke. Almost every one of you guys know people or know of people or personally have had contact. I've had several students who have had it during the course of this period. And take it from what I'm saying. I'm in the high risk group. I'm a 70-year-old, as you can see, African American male. I have, I'm a little overweight, and I have a little heart issue that I deal with, and so yes. That's good. Yeah, Grandma 71. That's good. That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. Um, every day though, you hear people. I mean, I look at the CNN quite a bit, and I see on the news period um, that, and I know people personally who have passed away from it. Young people. I'm talking about in their 30s, 20s. And so it doesn't know any age or race or sex. It's very, very serious. And so I want to see all of my students be able to do well. I look forward to next year at this same time that I'm able to, well, you guys are online and all over the country, but I could at least get out of the house and not have to wear a mask. I don't have to wear a mask doing a lecture with you guys because it's just me down here, but you know what I'm talking about. Well, I'm glad. That's good. I'm happy for you. But I keep all of my students in my prayers, and wish you guys, again, a happy Thanksgiving. And I will be grading your week 2 assignments by the end of Friday. Tomorrow I'm going to take off grading. I got about, in this class, I got about 15 papers to grade. Yep, and I'll grade those. I've already did discussion posts, and so we're all good with that. All right, so good night, and I'll see you next week.